us were sitting at a picnic table, and we sat there and we said, why the hell aren't there more women? And so out of that, WTF was born.
Hi everybody, and welcome to today's Women Tech Forum event. Congrats to everyone for making time for themselves today. I know it's not easy. I'm Tansy McCluskey. I work at Facebook, who are sponsoring today's event. Firstly, a huge thank you to Women Tech Forum for continuing to run events for our community. I love that despite the usual conferences not going ahead, Women Tech Forum were agile in finding ways to help us still network, meet up and learn. I'm not actually part of Women Tech Forum. I just go to the events as often as I can. You can usually find me somewhere near the buffet table. Actually, the video that's just on, I'm sure you can see me at PTC near the buffet table. So that's me if any of you have met me before. But when I was asked to do the intros as an event, I jumped at the opportunity to engage with the community and provide a little note on Facebook. One of my favourite things about working at Facebook is the culture and our top-down encouragement for diversity and inclusion initiatives, including Women's Tech Forum. There have been so many times at the beginning of my career in tech, I was the only person who looked like me in the room. For a while, I just thought that was the way things were, but Facebook has been different. We have such a diverse mix of employees, and the culture promotes inclusion of thoughts and ideas, no matter where or whom they come from. Don't get me wrong, we still have a long way to go, but we're trying. If this year has taught me anything, this year has been challenging, to put it mildly. It's changed our way of working entirely. As a personal example, this room used to be kindly referred to as the junk room, but it got promoted in March to my office and will remain so for the foreseeable future. If this year's taught me anything, it's that habits and traditional ways of working aren't necessarily optimum, and that perhaps now we have a moment to change things, shape the way the industry behaves. We have a chance to look at if there are positives with our new way of life, perhaps reducing the idea of office presenteeism and empowering people in the industry to work in a way that suits them best. With that in mind, I'm really excited to introduce today's session, What's Your Edge at Work? I personally don't know what my edge is, so I'm absolutely thrilled to learn today with everybody else. Remember, Q&A is available throughout the event. Details should be on the screen now. And I'm told that we're quite a chatty bunch, so please don't be shy. Send in as many questions as you. We have two amazing guest speakers today. Bonnie Davis is a consultant, facilitator, speaker, and executive coach who has spent her career following her passion for learning, growth, and positive change. She has a master's in organizational psychology and certifications in coaching and facilitation. Bonnie designs and delivers programs that develop leaders, improve performance, help teams work better, and make work a more meaningful experience. For almost 25 years, Bonnie has built her expertise in human resource leadership and consulting roles in companies like Deloitte, Sun Microsystems, before starting her own business. Bonnie grew up in New York City and now lives in Denver, Colorado with her husband and 2 children. Bijal Choksi is also an organizational psychologist with over 20 years of experience in corporate America. She's fascinated by human and organizational behavior and the changes that often come up living our complex lives. She's certified in coaching, biofeedback, mindfulness, and the science of happiness. Throughout her coaching practice, Bijal helps high-profile women and minorities stop thinking small and guides them through a process to develop their own unique leadership style. Bijal moved to Denver 20 years ago from New York City, has 2 boys, loves rooftop bars, and has finally embraced the idea that she's no longer a city girl. A fun fact about Bonnie and Bijal is that they share the same birthday, June the 29th. So with that, over to our guest speakers.
Thank you, Tansy. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And even though Bonnie and I share a birthday, we really did not intend to wear matching white shirts here, but here we are. Okay, well, before we get started with the official material for the masterclass, we want to extend our heartfelt wishes that you and each of your family members are healthy and doing well during this trying times. When Susie Gleason, one of the founders of WTF, shared the vision of these master classes, Bonnie, myself, and our other business partner, Lisa, were 100% in. There's so much alignment between our groups. We've done a lot of work internally and externally for companies in the tech infrastructure industry, and we too have wondered, why aren't there more women in this industry? And why aren't there more women leaders in this industry? Kind of frustrating. This is a space that Bonnie and I are especially passionate about and work in. And if we can help you on your path during this masterclass, help you grow a little, learn a new skill, gain some knowledge, and give you hope, we're honored and excited. Today, we're here to lift you up. The focus today will be on lifting you up by uncovering your edge. Hopefully, Tansy, I want to hear yours after this, but we'll uncover your edge. What can help set you apart, give you that comparative advantage? And if you work on and master how to apply your strengths, it truly can be transformative for your career. It certainly has been for me. And it doesn't matter if you're looking to start a business at some point, get more clients, move up the ranks in your current organization, or if you're looking for your next opportunity at some point. Knowing your strengths helps with all of those. It allows you to show up more powerfully and improve how others perceive you. Not only that, but the icing on the cake is that you'll have more fun at work, get less frustrated, get into that coveted flow state, and reach your goals more easily. So to lay out how this session will be run, we'll walk through the material, which will take about 40 minutes. We'll have interaction throughout via the poll and chat functions, and we'll leave time at the end for questions. This will not be a class where you can passively absorb the material. So we ask you to close Outlook and other distractions. Give us your focus for this 1 hour. Get out a sheet of paper or a notebook for a couple of hands-on exercises and be active participants. And with that, let's take a moment to land here, get fully present. I invite you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, perhaps the deepest of the day. Feel the floor supporting you, and then slowly exhale. And here we are. Next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from sunny Denver, Colorado. Although I was very sad when I woke up this morning and my phone had a notification about unhealthy air quality, not nearly what those of you in California have been experiencing, but still worrisome with fires here in Colorado also. Before we jump into our content, we want to share a little bit about what we do. Bijal and I, along with our other business partner, Lisa Taylor, are founders of a firm that we call HuWork. And as you can see, we are a women-owned firm. So the Women's Tech Forum's mission to be a community of women and allies really resonates with us. We named our company HuWork because we really believe in the power of inspiring humans at work. The three of us have deep corporate backgrounds, working mostly in high-tech companies, some of the companies that all of you work for, like we've been at Sun Microsystems and HP. And frankly, we weren't always feeling inspired at work. So we get what it's like to navigate organizational challenges, which is why we feel so passionate about helping people make work a better experience. We do this by focusing on three things. First, consulting projects. We help organizations be great places to work through levers like company culture and building a strong leadership pipeline. Next is coaching. We work one-on-one with hundreds of leaders at all levels. Many of them work for the same companies that you do right now. We help people get clear on how to make a bigger impact and make meaningful change that sticks for the long term, while also keeping their happiness and their well-being in check. And like this session, we love getting in front of groups, both in a room and now, of course, a lot more virtually, to help people expand their capability and help teams work better together. And we're finding now more than ever, as we can't count on certainties like breathing fresh air or going to the grocery store without a mask or sending our children to school, it's more important than ever to be able to inspire humans at work. Next slide. Now that you know who we are, let's talk about what to expect of our time together. We'll start with getting familiar with the power of strengths to help enhance our impact. Many of us know this intuitively, but there's also some really compelling data to help reinforce the reasons to know and grow your strengths. Then you'll do an exercise, then we'll also share a tool to help you identify your strengths. Some of us can name our strengths right away, but the truth is for many of us, when things come so naturally, we aren't actually even aware that they're giving us an edge. We'll also talk a bit about your weaknesses. In most jobs, realistically, we're not able to ignore them. So although we can't make them disappear, we will share guidance on how to manage them. And finally, we're going to talk about using all of this learning beyond today's workshop. That's always important for Bijal and I. We want you to have a great experience here, but more importantly, we want it to mean something afterwards. So we'll talk about what can we do on a regular basis to keep our own strengths top of mind and engage others in strengths-based dialogue. And of course, we'll leave time at the end for questions, but keep using the chat. I've been seeing some stuff coming in, so we love the engagement. It's so hard not having the wonderful connections that I saw in your video. It's so hard not having that buffet table that Tansy talked about, but let's use the chat to the most of our ability. So before we jump in, it's probable that most of you have already done some strengths work. And so Kristen's going to help us with a poll. We're going to get a baseline of some of your prior experiences with strengths. So I see the pop-up that a new poll is live. We want to know how many of you have taken a strengths assessment. Standout and Clifton Strengths, which was previously called Strengths Finder, are two of the more popular ones that you may have done. So let us know if you've taken Standout or Clifton Strengths, also known as Strengths Finder. And if there's a different one that you've done or another comment you have about strengths assessments, then please go ahead and share that with us in the chat.
And also, don't worry if you haven't taken a strengths assessment. We'll be walking through an exercise shortly to help you identify some of your strengths.
All right, I always love watching the poll come in. It's like seeing a slot machine. We're all big winners. That's the nice part about it. Looks like there is a good number that have taken the Clifton Strengths or Strengths Finder, and that makes sense that that number is larger, and it could be changing, but that one has been around for a little longer. So a little bit of history. Marcus Buckingham was at the Gallup organization when he created the Strengths Finder. I don't know exactly how long ago. I want to say going on about 20 years ago with Clifton. And so Marcus then left Gallup to create the Marcus Buckingham Company, or TMBC. And I happen to be part of the faculty of the Marcus Buckingham Company. And then Marcus created Standout. So probably a little more history than you need, but that's a short way of saying that Standout's not, it's a newer tool, and StrengthsFinder's been around a lot longer. If you have that survey that you've done, that assessment nearby, maybe it's on a bookshelf, maybe it's in an electronic file, you can grab that. As Bijal said, you don't need to, but it might be useful to have that data nearby. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. And we have completed our welcome and opening. So let's get to our first topic, and we can go to the next slide after that one. Let's get to the first topic on what do we mean by a strength. We're going to go to the next slide now. A strength is an activity that makes you feel strong. So I want that to sink in for a moment. This is really important because it's what you actually love to do at work. And it means that that might be different from the things that you're really good at doing. So strengths are the actions and mindsets that come really naturally to you, and that if you use them regularly, they'll help you to be more powerful at work and feel more energized. When you define a strength as an activity that makes you feel strong, that of course means that its opposite is a weakness or something that makes you feel weak. So you might feel drained, depleted, maybe even bored when you do those things. And as I say that, you're all probably thinking about a few things that come to mind for you right now. You can teach skills and knowledge, but you can't teach a strength. So for example, I can teach someone how to create PowerPoint slides, but it doesn't mean that it'll be a strength for them. This idea can be put into action. Of course, This is nice to know your strengths, but the so what is putting it into action, to be intentional about knowing how your strengths help you make a greater impact at work. So I'm going to give you an example for myself using the format of I feel strong when, and then adding how it helps me at work. So for me, I feel strong when I provide a safe space for people to be open and vulnerable about what's hard for them in their jobs. This helps me at work because it allows my clients to reflect deeply and brainstorm solutions to improve their impact. Bijal, how about you? What's a strength statement for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have felt that that was a strength of yours. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
And I'll own one of my strengths, which is that I feel strong when I'm creating. So whether it's creating a new product, a new service, a new team, or even an organization, and using that same format that you did, that helps me because I come up with innovative ideas for our business, Bonnie, and also for our clients.
Awesome. And I've seen that in action for you as well. And I love the language you just use. I'm going to own my strength, because for some of us, it feels a little bit vulnerable to do that. So we're going to encourage you to keep doing that throughout this workshop. We're going to take this a step further to talk about a strengths lens, which is seeing the positive that we bring to each other in our work situations instead of zooming in on the negative. So imagine that. Think about what a better world we'd live in if we all saw each other first for our positive. I know that makes me really excited. But the challenge is most of us have not been raised this way. So I ask people this question all the time. If you brought home a report card when you were a kid with 4 A's and 1 C, which grade would your parents ask you about? And I have never met anyone, regardless of what country or culture they come from, who didn't say that their parents wouldn't ask, well, what went wrong with the C? Instead of saying something like, I see you really love math. Let's talk about how you can apply your math skills to something like a future job or tutoring other kids in the neighborhood who might need some help. And this is really challenging to do. I will admit that as a mom of kids that are now in 6th and 10th grade, where their grades are getting more important, I do sometimes catch myself in the old thinking of looking at their lower grades first instead of starting with the strength lens. Most of our work environments are similar, unfortunately. We get a lot more attention and constructive feedback, which I have in air quotes because it doesn't always feel constructive, for what we need to improve, and not enough praise and encouragement for where we excel. And these are the reasons that Bijal and I feel so passionate about taking time to talk about the strength lens with groups like yours. I want to make one more point about strengths, which is that there's no good and bad strengths. In workshops, as people take assessments like Standout, I often hear something like this. I don't want to be the organized one. I want to be the creative one. So there's some sort of judging ourselves on good and bad strengths. The value of diversity in life is true in strengths as well. The more variety, the more successful the teams can be. So one of the key messages today is whatever your strengths are, embrace them as your unique edge rather than judging that they should be different or better. We've now established baseline definition of strengths. And if you have questions about this, please use our chat. In the meantime, Bijal is going to lead us in an exercise to dig into what you came here for, which is to get We'll get next slide. Thanks.
Such a good reminder, Bonnie, to not judge our strengths and own them. Thank you. Well, for this exercise, we're going to follow a think, write, share model, meaning that we'll give you time to think about your answers to these questions. We'll ask you to write it down, and then we'll give you an opportunity to share. So I'll read each question. You'll have 30 seconds to think about your answer and then write it down somewhere. The invitation, as Bonnie mentioned, is to set aside any preconceived notions that you might have about what your strengths should be, and be open and vulnerable, like the woman in the picture there, as you explore what your edge actually is. So here we go. Question 1. When do you feel most energized at work? What activities are you doing? And we'll give you 30 seconds here. Second question, what do you get praised for the most? Next is, what do you do better than 10,000 people? And the last question for this exercise, what can your colleagues always lean into you for? Okay, great. We hope you gave yourself that time for reflection on these questions, which will point to your edge, your strengths. Now for the share portion of this exercise. Go ahead and use the chat function to share at least one of your answers to these questions. We're excited to see what you came up with. And while you're typing your responses, I'll just share what one of my answers would be if I was doing this exercise with fresh eyes. I will focus in on number 2. So I have gotten praise for showing up and taking action, even if I don't have as much information or time as I would have liked in an ideal world. So if you want movement on something, then I'm your gal. Bonnie, how about you? Can you share how you would answer one of these questions?
Yes, for me, what I get praised for and what really energizes me is taking a ton of information and making some sense of it. So listening deeply, asking clarifying questions, and synthesizing it into some meaning. So I love when a coaching client says something like, wow, how did you do that? I never realized that about myself until you just shared back what I told you. Or in a team workshop when teams say the same thing. We've been grappling with these issues for months and you finally helped us make sense of it.
That is a gift of yours. I've seen that in action. Okay, well, I am looking through these items in the chat, and I mean, they are so diverse. Thank you all for sharing there. There's teamwork, creativeness, calm, connecting, and the list goes on and on. So these are really diverse, and imagine if this wide spectrum of strengths was actually identified on every team and used effectively. How powerful would that team be? Maybe you all should just band together and start a business together. I bet you'd go far. Okay, so the next step, thank you all for sharing, and go ahead, please keep typing it. Everybody can read them and we can be supporting each other as we are sharing what our strengths are. So the next step is to put your strengths on a Post-it somewhere and stick it where you can see it daily as a reminder to ask yourself, how might I use one of these strengths today? Because the output that's needed in your job might be the same. Your title might not change immediately, but you can still tilt the how you execute towards your strengths more every single day. And this, I promise you, will be a game changer for how you experience work. All right, so now you all have a starter list of your strengths. We sometimes hear about people doubting what's on their list when they answer these questions. And we get asked, how do I actually know if something really is a strength of mine? So we're going to cover this next. Next slide.
Okay, I also want to acknowledge thanks you to those of you who mentioned in the chat that my audio was a little bit staticky. I did a small tweak, hoping that's better. So as Bijal said, it is nice to have a tool, and so we wanted to give you one. I also wanted to mention that we often do the exercise that you just did, and obviously very briefly, we often do it in workshops as an interview assignment. So two people meet, they ask each other those questions, and so I encourage you to try that with your teams, with people in your personal life. There's something really powerful about answering those questions, talking about them out loud, about what you're great at, hearing your own words, and more importantly, having them land for somebody else to hear them and respond. So we're going to share a tool called Sign of a Strength, which is very helpful to remember. And I personally love acronyms, so we're going to give you two acronyms today. Here's the first one. But so you can read the SIGN. What I want to give you to take away on this is that for me, a lot of the sign of a strength is about the energy that you feel. And think about the before, the during, and the after. So what are the things that before you do them, you feel really energized and excited to jump in? You're not procrastinating them. They jump top to your list because you can't wait to do them. And then while doing them, you're in the zone, that word flow that Bijal mentioned at the start. Time melts away and you don't feel pulled to those distractions like your phone or other things. And even sometimes after you do these things, you're still feeling that energy or that buzz. You can't wait to wake up the next morning and keep going. So that's a good tool for you to take away, use with yourself, use with your tools. We've been talking so far about the benefits to you as individuals in knowing and leveraging your strengths. Now we're going to shift to talk about the business impact of using your strengths regularly. Next slide.
All right, so strengths and the benefits of using them is not just some theory that Bonnie and I came up with on the back of a napkin. So I do feel like even though it feels good to do something that you feel strong doing, we want to also share the data. And luckily, there's really deep research from Gallup on how strengths lead to a variety of improved business results. Next slide. What you're looking at right now is a visual representation of Gallup's 2016 State of the American Workplace report. You can see that this involved over 1 million people. And the output of this is that they found many positive impacts of engagement on performance. So the data show that compared to the least engaged teams in an organization, the most engaged teams are a whopping 21% more profitable. How cool is that? 17% more productive, and customer satisfaction also went up. And you can see the results on the level of individual performance too. Take a closer look at the bottom of the graph now. Absenteeism is 41% lower when teams are highly engaged. Turnover is 24% lower. And that's for high turnover organizations like retail or food service. For lower turnover organizations, turnover is 59% lower for highly engaged teams. And then beyond the numbers, what's really hidden in this visual representation are really personal stories. They show that when you're engaged, you're not dreading Monday. You're engaged in your work. And it makes sense. People who are engaged don't hate their jobs. Work doesn't suck. And they may even love their jobs. Just take a moment to imagine that world. I want that for all of you. Next slide. And when Gallup isolated all the factors that led to those amazing performance results and increased engagement from employees, what was the single factor that showed the highest correlation? Strengths. Specifically, when people have the opportunity to do what they do best every day, aka use their strengths, the individual, team, and organization perform better and employees are happier. We really hope that the data we're sharing here shows beyond a doubt the benefit of leading with strengths. And we know that we live in a world where our caveman brains tend to zero in on what's wrong, what we are not doing masterfully. So we would be remiss if we didn't also touch on how to work with our weaknesses. Next slide.
Okay, well, yes, you're right, Bijal. When we do workshops, one-on-one coaching, even at cocktail parties sometimes, back when we went to cocktail parties, when I talk about strengths work, people say, yeah, I get it. It makes sense. But I hear a question that goes something like this. Bonnie, you don't understand my company. How will this work when people are told they need to fix their weaknesses? So we get it. We also need to work on our weaknesses. For example, I am terrible at the bookkeeping side of being an entrepreneur, but if I never sent out invoices, I couldn't make a living. So I do try to get better at it. And Bijal and I actually are both learning and growth junkies. In fact, one of my top strengths in Clifton Strengths Finder is called learner. So the process of continually learning and growing is actually a really big motivator for me. I always have a stack of books and podcasts that are bigger than I can possibly consume. So by all means, improve what energizes you and don't ignore the areas that are critical to your success. Here's our key message on weaknesses. Think about how much time you're spending on them. If it's most of your day, say more than 50%, then you're probably feeling really drained and not super successful. We're going to go to the next slide and share the second of two acronyms of today, which is called STOP. And so conveniently, yes, you could stop doing your weaknesses. Sometimes we can't, but the S is for maybe you can stop. So we sometimes tell ourselves a story that what we're doing is really critical. But if you dig deeper, you may find out that no one actually reads or does anything with that monthly report that takes you a full day to put together. And yes, that is a real example from earlier in my career. Or maybe you just realize you don't need to do A+ work and take a full day for that report. Maybe you can trim it down and it wouldn't feel like your best work, but it will suffice for the expectations. One of our favorite tools for stopping is called the 3Ds. Can you dump it, delegate it, or do it differently? The T is for teaming up. Think about who else can help you do this so that it's more fun or you can learn from them. So getting back to my bookkeeping example, my husband is a financial planner and a QuickBooks genius. He has very patiently sat down and taught me how to use QuickBooks. Plus, thankfully, he does some of the work for me. But what amazes me is he offered to do this for years until I finally said yes. And I think a lot of us do this. We try to be the hero by convincing ourselves that, oh, I can figure this out. I'm smart. I can do it. But in reality, we're draining ourselves because we can just as easily ask for help. The O is offering a strength, and this could simply be a time management solution where you rearrange your day and your projects so that you spend more of your time on what energizes you. Or you may be able to leverage a strength to make it easier. So I'm going to share an example that happened to a coaching client a few months ago. This was pre-COVID, and this client was getting pressure from her boss to go to more industry networking events, and she felt really uncomfortable in these social situations. And when we explored her strengths, it was clear that she's really great at strong relationships on one-on-one and smaller group basis, and she has deep technical subject matter expertise that she loves to share with others. So when she was able to offer those strengths as she entered a big networking event, instead of feeling the pressure of having to be charming in the spotlight with strangers, it really helped her to ease her anxiety and show up as her authentic and confident self. The P is for perceiving it differently. Think of ways to make something more fun and less of a chore. So one tip I will share is get out the timer. We all have them on our phones these days. And just see what's the most I can do in a short amount of time. So if you feel like you're not creative, grab your timer, grab a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and think about how many creative ideas can I come up with in a short period of time. No judgment, just get them out there. Or to make it even more fun, can you do that brainstorming with somebody else who's really creative? Even if you change the script in your head, for example, often our inner voice says to us, you're not good at that. And you know what? It makes it even harder when our head is telling us that. And of course, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So something more useful like, I'm smart enough to get better at this will help you. I know that sounds like a cheesy mind trick, but it's really amazing how we have the power to use our brains to help our actions and our energy. And I'm going to share a true confession with all of you. I am actually doing this right now, the perceive it differently. So I personally don't consider presenting to groups of a few hundred people to be a strength of mine, especially in this virtual environment when I can't interact with people. I'm great in a room, face-to-face, call it 20 to 30 people. But today I'm connecting to something that has huge value to me, which is to help people embrace real change, positive impact, and connecting it to my passion to spread the word about the value of strengths. So enough about me and my vulnerable moments. Bijal, how about you? Can you share how you've managed a weakness in your career?
Yes, I can. And thank you, Bonnie, for keeping it real. Because what is it about women and perfection? Why is it so hard to admit a weakness? Well, anyway, I'll channel Brene Brown, who I've been rereading, and be vulnerable here. One of my weaknesses is that I lose steam on long-term projects. So I'm great at the startup phase, but if it drags on too long, it's pretty draining to me. So for example, I started a nonprofit 16 years ago, but as soon as it came time to actually run it, I recruited someone to take on that role because I knew I wouldn't be successful. So I guess I kind of used a combination of the S and the T from the STOP model, stop and team up.
Awesome. Thank you, Bijal. That is a great example. And a lot of people have that, I think. People say, I'm great at starting but not finishing, or I'm great at finishing, but it's the getting started where I get stuck. So there's 2 key points we want to leave you with about weaknesses. The first is it's okay to admit what you're not great at. Your weaknesses do not define who you are. And in fact, it will really help you if you do less of them. And the second is once you have clarity on your strengths, it boosts your ability to lean into those as your brand and your credibility instead of feeling like you are defined by your weaknesses. We're going to go to the next slide. So at the beginning of this workshop, we did that poll asking you whether you've done a strengths-based assessment. And I want to also acknowledge, I saw there was a very high percentage of people that did other assessments. So I feel like I wish we had another hour to talk about those. But anyway, going back to those of you who have done whatever it is, I bet that many of you would say, yeah, it was interesting, but I didn't really do anything with it. So people say it sat in a drawer, like an aged like a fine wine, and we understand. We get busy. Even the best workshop content feels like extra work to integrate into our routine after we learn it. So our final topic for today is to share tips on how to engage with others about your strengths. So the next slide. Our first recommendation is to set aside personal reflection time. Give yourself that gift every week if you can, maybe every few weeks, to think about how much you're using your strengths at work or if you want to make a few changes. Keep in mind, we can always get better at our strengths. So if you think about an Olympian, they don't say, oh, I've won that gold medal in swimming, I'm not going to keep getting better. They're going to keep improving. And by the way, you're going to feel even more successful when you keep growing and expanding your genius. Some of the things you may want to do, seek out new projects, maybe setting new goals that bring in your strengths. Find other people to coach or mentor in your areas of strengths. And if right now you're thinking, I just don't have the chance in my job to use my strengths, maybe find some volunteer work outside of your job when you can do that for that energy boost and for knowing that you're feeling good about using those strengths. So moving beyond you to the people that you work with, we're going to share some tips about working with your manager and other people. So first of all, with your manager, we do encourage you to take more ownership for identifying and growing your strengths and talking to your boss, even if your boss is not initiating these conversations. And this is really critical. Bijal shared some great data earlier. I have a few more data points here. One is that according to Gallup, managers account for 70% of variance in employee engagement. So if you are feeling a little disengaged, be proactive with your manager before it gets worse and you're feeling less successful. And for those of you who manage people, I know that it's some of you do, some of you don't. Research shows that employees who have frequent strengths-based conversations with their managers are 2 to 6 times more likely to be engaged. So a few coaching questions that we'll leave you with that conversation. Simply ask your people, did you have a chance to use your strengths every day? And if they didn't, then what does the coming week look better? And if it's now been a few weeks that they haven't had a chance to use their strengths for at least a little bit every day, I don't mean the whole day, but at least a little bit, if it's going on a few weeks, then that's probably a red flag that there's going to be an engagement challenge with this person later on. The next coaching question is, do you feel you have been adding outstanding value? So strengths, yes, it's great to use them. Hopefully that message has come across, but we're in businesses to make money and have an impact. So when you're truly aligning strengths with your goals and your work, you're going to see the results and the value you add to the team. And the last coaching question, which I'm sure many of you are asking already, and it's one of my favorites, is quite simply, how can I help you this week? Which gives your team members explicit permission to ask for what they need, which may be a way for you to empower them to use their strengths more and spend less time on their weaknesses. And of course, that can cover all kinds of other things around removing barriers and helping them at work. And for everyone in your personal and professional lives, there's opportunities all the time to acknowledge other people's true strengths. And I don't mean just acknowledging their actions and what they've done. I mean going deeper to say, what are the strengths that were in play there? So if you tell someone really specifically, I really admire your unique ability to solve big, hairy problems, or, you really listen to me in a way that shows you care, those are going to be so meaningful for people to energize them. And I bet they're going to energize you as well when you see that response and that reaction on their face. So we're going to turn to our chat, and I want to ask, what is one thing, as you're reading these questions on the slide, as you've been thinking about coaching people and connecting with your colleagues and your boss and other people, what's one question that you'd want to ask somebody at work about their strengths? Any ideas that are coming to mind after looking at these? So what's one question you'd ask someone at work? Or if nothing's coming to mind, that's okay. One of these questions on the screen, if one of them are really resonating with you, then just share those with us instead. So we want to make this real for you and think about what are ways that you'll actually be asking questions with strengths. All right, well, we're going to let those answers come in on the chat, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to sum up and give you time for some final action and reflection and our final Q&A. So Bijal, go ahead and help us wrap up.
Sounds awesome. Okay, next slide, please. Now for the challenge part of this masterclass. Let us challenge you to think about a few things. Why is it important for you to figure out how to progress your career right now? Who needs you to be on your A game this week? What outcomes and opportunities might be passing you by because you're not tapping into your full potential? We know these are tough questions, and sometimes a little bit of tough love is exactly what's needed to kickstart changes. So going back to our Think Right Share model, we're going to give you a little bit of time right now to do some reflection on what you learned today. So we'll give you a minute to specifically think about what do you commit to do this week, and then write it down. And lastly, share in the chat so we can virtually cheer each other on. Okay, we've got 1 minute on the clock. Thank you. I see a lot of people have already started typing in their action items. And you can keep that going. And I know a lot of you know each other on this call, so reach out and share when you follow through on your commitment to support each other. We oftentimes think about our careers as a really individual thing and a silo, but really we can support each other. And I know that's what this group is about. So even after this masterclass, go ahead and find a partner and support each other. Next slide. We hope we've inspired you today to focus on and spend more time on your strengths. And we wanted to leave you with a quote from Marcus Buckingham, who Bonnie already spoke, was one of the founders of StrengthsFinder as well as Standout. You will be at your most productive, creative, focused, generous, and resilient when you focus how to play to your strengths most of the time. And when you do, you and everyone around you will win. Next slide. Well, we hope you've learned a lot today, and we also want you to come out of this masterclass with even more resources and support. So we've reduced the price of our online course on strengths for the WTF members through September. And when the pandemic started, we started offering free career office hours where people can virtually ask us anything. So I'll put a link in the chat during the Q&A if you are interested in checking that out. And on our website, we have articles that you can readily access. We do hope that the end of the masterclass will not be the end of our relationship with this group. Do stay in touch. You can follow HuWork on LinkedIn, sign up for our newsletter, or email Bonnie and I directly. We appreciate you all for being here. We celebrate you for investing in your career, taking the time today, because the world needs more people like you sharing your gifts now more than ever. Thank you. Next slide. As we transition to the Q&A part of the class, which Nadia will facilitate, go ahead and type in the chat a takeaway from today's masterclass for you.
Hey everyone, Nadia here from WTF. Bijal and Bonnie, thank you so much. This was so helpful. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me personally is that, this is a journey. While some of us may have had some epiphanies in terms of identifying like what our strengths are, it's okay if you didn't. And this is going to be a continuous process. So thank you for sharing all the work you've been doing at HuWork. I think it's definitely equipped us with a lot of great questions and how we can start to frame these things as we continue on and improve on identifying our strengths. So thank you so much. So we've had a lot of really great questions that have rolled in. So I guess we can get right into it. Thanks for everyone that submitted them, and you can continue to submit questions as they come up in the Q&A feature. So I'll start off with a question for you, Bijal. How can strengths help me decide if I should accept a new job or role?
Yeah, we get this question quite a bit. And, when people are evaluating an opportunity, they usually are thinking about the compensation, the title, are they aligned with the purpose of the role or the company? Who are they going to be working with? But I think the question that a lot of people overlook is, what are the specific activities that will fill my week when I take on this role? So what will I actually be doing? And then where are those items landing? Like, are they landing on my strengths column or are they landing in my weakness column? So, for example, you might be really excited to take on a director role, but if you hate managing people and this role means managing 20 people, it may not be the right fit for you. So I guess the takeaway would be, if you want to use a strength lens to evaluate an opportunity or even like a project that comes on your desk, focus on the what you'll be doing as much as everything else about the role.
Great, that makes sense. Bonnie, anything you want to add there?
I talked a few times about the word energy, and I think that becomes part of it. When you think about this job, are you mostly filled up and energized, or are you feeling drained and depleted? And so that's just a quick gut check, in addition to all the brain stuff that goes into thinking about a job, about whether or not most of the work is in your strength zone.
Perfect. All right, this next question I'll direct over to you, Bonnie. So we got some great feedback. This was a great warm-up to think about more deeply my strengths. And this may sound strange, but I am still not totally certain about what my strengths are. How can I keep getting more clarity on what they are?
Well, the exercises that we did earlier are a nice way to get that gut feel, but absolutely, it does help to get something from a validated assessment. And I love doing those assessments. You get the printout and you read about yourself. And so while they're sometimes not 100% accurate, there's always nice learnings. So we mentioned two of them earlier, Standout or Clifton Strengths. By the way, we are not attached to either of those. We make no money, so this is not a commercial. This is simply for your own learning and growth, but they're both readily available. Just Google them. They're pretty much the cost of a hardcover book. And yeah, they'll give you nice language. You know, when you read an assessment, you go, oh, that's right. Those are the words to describe me. And then my suggestion is get out a highlighter or a pen and just circle the words that are really most resonating. Because, Nadia, I think you used the word journey. It is a journey. And I've been doing this for many years now, and I'm constantly, of course, that's why I keep putting that off. It's not my strength. So keep at it. Don't think that this is the end of figuring out what your strengths are.
And then I'll just jump in here and mention that at marcusbuckingham.com, he has started offering the Standout Strengths Assessment for free during the pandemic. So if you're interested or just curious, now's a good time to take it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. And Bijal, I just wanted to say I love that you started the session with us closing our eyes and taking a deep breath, because I do think it's a great reminder that a lot of these findings really do need to come from within, from us, and we don't always dedicate that time to look inward and reflect. So I really love that, and I think we could all use some more of those deep breath exercises. So thank you for that.
Can you just get the kids to do it more?
Absolutely. Awesome. This next question, I think, is something that probably a lot of us are feeling, especially as we're stuck in quarantine and maybe we're all feeling overworked. But, what should someone do if they're feeling burnt out in their job? Do you have any advice? And I'd love to direct this one to you, Bijal, to start off.
Sure. What comes to mind first is really a distinction between burnout and working long hours or just being tired because we have an impending deadline for a project. So, those are really time boxed, and that doesn't generally lead to burnout. Burnout is when your batteries are just empty, and it doesn't usually happen overnight. And so the hard reality is that you probably won't fix it overnight. I was at a training last month, and a researcher shared that when someone's spending 20% or less on activities that they love, meaning their strengths, they have a much greater risk of burnout. And so the invitation is to take a look at where are you spending your time? What are you doing? Are you in that strength zone like Bonnie mentioned, or are you spending a lot of time on activities that are draining to you? So one idea is to put those items that you need to do that are on your, or that you are doing that are on that weakness column, make them an ask-only task. And what I mean by that is that you only do it if somebody actually asks you to. So no more volunteering just to please somebody else or another person on the team, or maybe even your boss if they haven't asked for it. And that way you're shifting your time more towards the strengthening activities. And then one other tip is to identify your top 3 strengths that you will use more of that month. And then stick it on a Post-it or just somewhere that you'll see it, and really make it a priority to use them more for a month. And then most people notice that once that balance starts improving, that the burnout starts fading.
Excellent. That makes sense.
I want to add, this sounds to me like being more like mom than facilitator, but take time off, take vacation time. A lot of people are going, I have nowhere to go. I can't travel. I'm not going to take time off. Take it, use it. If you can escape, and even if you're renting a house somewhere, even if you don't look at your technology, we are so fatigued and on overload from technology and demands that I can't emphasize this enough. We all really need to just decompress and refuel ourselves. It's really important now more than ever.
I completely agree with that. I just recently took a week off and I had nowhere to go. I didn't do anything. It was a staycation, but it just felt so great to disconnect from work, from my computer. So I completely agree. Everyone, if you can, you don't need to have a big trip plan. Just take time off for yourself. It's really important. Awesome. We have just a few more minutes here. I saw this question come in that I'd love to direct to you, since you did start to talk a little bit about some of those conversations you can have with your manager or direct reports. So the question is, how do you help realign your manager's thinking when your strengths don't necessarily line up with what your management values are as strengths? So how do you have those conversations with your managers? If you could dive a little bit deeper into that.
I would say, first of all, so this is a really big challenge, and I get it. It's not like, poof, I know my strengths, so I can change my workplace and change my goals and change my manager. I think the first thing is to dig deep on your commitment to your company's mission, what they're about, the big why, because if we come to work not being focused on the big why, so if you are framing wanting to use more of your strengths, not just in terms of, poor me, I can't use my strengths at work, but to frame it to your manager as something like, I feel so passionate about our purpose in the world and how we're changing the world, and I'm committed to this team and to our goals. And I also know this about myself, about what I'm really good at and where I can be my best. And for that reason, I'd like to spend more time with using my strengths. And so going to it from a place of strength, a place of a positive framing, instead of a place of like, I'm the victim and I don't get to use my strengths, is going to be a really nice way to get your manager's attention. And it could just be, again, that prioritization of really just looking at your time and going, how much of my time am I spending? And then to think about carving out and proposing something to your manager. So it could be starting up a program. It could be getting a mentor or mentoring somebody. So even if you can find one thing that sparks your energy, that helps you use and grow your edge, even if it's a few hours in a week, it will be a step in the right direction. And most managers, if you frame it that way and you take it on in little bits and those little bits grow, it's a nice way to slowly make change happen.
Perfect. All right. Well, we are just coming up to the hour here. So once again, I want to thank both of you so much for sharing all this. This was incredibly helpful. Thanks to everyone for engaging as well in the chat feature and the Q&A. For any questions that we didn't get to, we will be sure to post a recap on our blog at womenstechforum.com, so keep an eye out for that. And in closing, I'd love to pass it off to Elena. Elena, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nadia. On behalf of Women's Tech Forum, thank you so much for joining our session today, and thank you to Bijal and Bonnie for facilitating such an awesome discussion and internal thought. If you guys have friends or colleagues that weren't able to make the live session today, don't worry, we will be posting a live recording on our website, so keep an eye out for that. Again, thank you to Facebook, and we of course want to thank all of our 2020 sponsors. Without them, these sessions wouldn't be possible. And to our super active community, thank you guys for giving us a passion project during COVID times. These masterclasses are really keeping us going. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that the Global Women in Telco and Tech event hosted by Capacity Media is virtual this year, and it's going to be held on Tuesday, September 29th. I think it's free to register, and there's a ton of great sessions to check out. And that's it. See you guys.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.